I always feel when I enter a room, am I allowed to be here? Do people want to hear from me? And there is like a sense of belonging and home that I feel with them that I don't feel with the outside world.
So you have this much more larger time to kind of build a sense of identity of who you are and where you live. Do you see me? Do you know what I've gone through? You can have that conversation in your head. We're all holding this together, and somewhere if we're ready and we're open, as you are, something lands for us.
Hi, welcome back to Sincere Practice. My name is Helen Bass, and today we're back with Nilifer and Gina. Gina and Nilifer are actually kind enough to interview me this time, but as always, this is open to free flow discussion. So before we started recording, Gina had just gotten back from a profound vacation, and I'd love to hear more from you first, Gina, before we start.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
good morning, Helen and
Good
Nilifer.
morning.
It's so good to be with you both. And thank you for my morning question. I remember the last time we started, we thought about how do we start our morning? And so Nilifer opened up the question of how my profound experience was on this meditation training. So as you know, I was actually receiving a training called the Empathic Ground through the realization process with Judith Blackstone. And so I spent 5 days with her in Woodstock, New York, in her yurt with several other teachers who do this work. And it's an embodied meditation training to really come home to the most deepest, subtle parts of ourselves into our wholeness. So we got a chance to practice with each other. I have never met Judith in person, and that was profound. As it will be, if we were to meet you in person one day too, Helen, it adds that extra little piece of life. You get to see these extra layers, so it was absolutely beautiful. I would really recommend it to anyone who wants to really come home deep and intimate with themselves, and also feel connected with others at the same time without losing your own ground of being. So you stay whole. And this was the relational aspect of the training, is how do we stay in our own bodies, so to be integrated in our own wholeness, and at the same time be one and connected and unified with the field that holds all of us in a deep way. So thank you for asking. There's more, I'm sure. But that's sort of how I started that week a few weeks ago. I'm still suffering from jet lag, which is only 3 hours, but I feel as I get older, it feels more like I have to give myself permission to really rest when we're working with letting go, in deep meditation. So I started my morning with that. I started with one of the practices, and here I am with both of you, and you get to be who you are in exactly wherever you are. And I think that's a beautiful place to start, So I'm so grateful to be with both of you, to have an opportunity, Helen, to turn our tables a little bit to focus on you. Which has been a real gift for me anyways, to have worked with you for the last maybe 2 or 3 years. I think we've known each other. And I guess I would love to ask you, just before I even get to all of your work that you do, the service that you offer to this world, is what brings you joy? What brings you joy?
I was just having dinner with a couple friends last night, and I think that joy for me is being able to do this, being able to ask questions, create connections, create relationships. I love reading. I probably read 6 books a month. I'm a voracious reader. But a lot of the books that I love reading are really specific. Like, I think it really ties into the through line of my personality, but I love just biographies of people's lives. I also love reading about business. I've loved reading about business years before I even became a business owner, but just hearing from other people how they've manufactured or created a really successful company around generosity and giving. And um, I could probably spend hours in the middle of my living room, just crouched up in a little book with my cup of coffee in my hand. Um, yeah, those are like, it's just simple things, I think. Yeah,
Mm. Oh, it's
thank
so
you.
beautiful. Oh, it's beautiful. It's a way to, and you, that joy is just so contagious. Just as you're speaking, I feel all of you.
Mm,
You know,
thank
yeah, it's really lovely. And I don't, and I know that Nilifer and I are co interviewing. So if you have a question, Nilifer.
Yeah, and hello to both of you as well. And Helen, I am getting to know you more recently, so I don't have that longer time connection that Gina has with you. And I have to tell you that there is something about you that just really draws me in, and I would imagine that that
you.
is the same experience that your other viewers have, so and listeners have. So I'm just curious because what I sense in you is a really deep, wise soul.
Mm.
And if you had to think about it, so this is in line with Gina's sort of embodied deeper question, is what do you think has brought that about for you? Like who has been the person, or who have been the persons in your life, or as you look at things intergenerationally, whose spirit do you carry?
Mm, that's a really good question. Um, I think everyone's spirit, really. Well, first of all, I'm a Christian, so the Holy Spirit, obviously. But a lot of the a lot of the way that I grew up is twofold. I grew up in a multi-generational household.
Hmm.
My grandma moved into our house when I was 15, but before that, I was I was raised in an aura of grief. And what I mean by that is like 2 weeks after I was born, my grandma died. The person that I was named after, my grandma Helen. And I grew up around so many of those stories of she was an entrepreneur, she had your same hairstyle, she carried so much wisdom. And
Mm.
so hearing someone modeled after my namesake with my same last name, with my same first name, I was like, oh, I want to step into those shoes. And she was a profoundly faithful woman too. So like faith was always part of our tradition. And part and part of Christian faith is just being in community, because so much of the early church faced a lot of persecution and judgment over the cross. So my parents raised me in the church, and there was always room for accountability. And part of that accountability is also other women as part of the quote village, if you will, teaching me how to ask questions, how to think about the world, how to challenge my own perceptions about things, how to talk about myself in an honest way as opposed to making myself look good.
Mm.
I'm still working on that, by the way, of like being so honest
Mm.
that I don't always honor the other person too in a conversation. So even that, like being aware of the things that I can grow in. I think one of the most profound truths that I've learned in faith is that like we're always going to find fault in ourselves. There are always going to be areas that we're going to fall short, but that progression of growth and wholeness is lifelong.
Mm.
Um, so I've always had that perspective. And then I think in moments of pain, there have been mentors, specifically other women in my youth group, tell me that I was worth seeing and that I was worth talking to in those times and areas. I had horrible social anxiety as a teenager. I've always been a reader. So my proneness, if we ever do see each other in person, is to be more quiet than talkative. But then my talkativeness will be more around asking questions and sharing insights about what I'm learning. And I had a mentor growing up. I would always sit by myself at church and in at school. And one of my mentors, Laura, she would point to someone sitting by themselves and she would say, "Hey, go talk to that person. This is how you talk to a person." I would sit next to her. She was 25, I was 15, every week at church. And she picked up on that. And slowly but surely, at the end of a year, I had a whole row of friends that knew me because I took the time to single them out and to pursue relationship with them. So I think, to answer your question more directly, Nilifer, the spirits that I carry are a multitude, but it's really grounded in faith community and grounded in candid family values, I think.
That really shows that there
Mm-hmm.
is a deeper level of wisdom, and it's so beautiful as you talk about the many spirits as well as your grandmother, because I know I can personally relate to that as well. And there's something about being raised in a multi-generational household or with several people in the home that creates that sense of community. Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. And then you also learn that there's more to life than the world that you're living in.
Mm-hmm.
I think seeing my grandma aging while my parents were working, while I was also growing up, it made me expand in my perspective. And so I'm a big believer in like just be around a lot of different people and different perspectives, and then
Mm-hmm.
it'll make you more curious about life.
Helen, I think one of the, it's what Nilifer was sharing. There's a deep, wise soul that I think many people are drawn to. It isn't about so much your age, it's about who you are. And there is something that kind of allows people to reconnect and come back into themselves through your eyes and through your body. There's something that draws you in to feel safe and to feel like it's okay to be yourself. And I think that's the kind of when we talk about your sincere podcast, I said, I think I don't know if you realize that is the gift, one of those many multi-generational gifts that have been passed down from living, possibly with, many of the elders and many of the people that you have been raised with and around, and the people that you interview. I think those are very intentional choices of who you meet and who you are drawn to, and particularly your faith. It has been very profound and very clear of how that has grounded you. And I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more, not as much as you would like, as to how has your faith drawn you to this work? Not simply just in your podcast, but as a person who wants to support and be with others in their suffering, really,
Yeah.
in their joy. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear more of that too.
Yeah, as you were saying that, Gina, a couple verses came to mind of like, love thy neighbor, um, carry one another's suffering as if it were your own. Those were teachings that I was profoundly raised in. And they made me think of like, even the parable of the Good Samaritan, like a man was robbed of all of his things, beaten to the ground. And Jesus tells this parable of like a priest going around this person. Another layman individual who was rich with every accolade ever made went around this person. But a Samaritan who was not pure in his faith or pure in his culture, half, took the time to care for this man and to give him part of his funds so that he can be taken care of. And then he leaves without even ever getting credit. And I love that parable because it talks about how you don't have to be the most religious person. You don't have to be the most culturally perfect person of whatever was happening during that time. You have to be the person willing to help, and that makes you, quote, better spiritually and I yeah, than the person that looks qualified, and part of that value of being sincere and being a person who is willing is knowing that you can just use what's in your hand and being faithful with those things. But I think I talk about this in one of my videos slash podcast episodes where I became a therapist because I had um, I had a friend who was in therapy, like another Filipino friend, and he referred me to this like nonprofit that provided low fee therapy services. And this woman just like talked to me for free. It was donation based. And from there I became interested in therapeutic work. The first therapy I'd ever been in, I was processing a lot of family trauma, and it was done through a Christian faith context. And because that was my first context into therapy, I became enamored with what working with people looked like. That regardless of how someone was, quote, too much or felt like they were too much, you could take the time to just meet with them every week and to reassure them that things will get better, because part of the pillars that I learned in that first therapy encounter was that a therapist believes in change, that change is possible, and that hope is possible. And what I was confused by going into grad school is the thought of being a blank slate. I'm not a blank slate therapist. And the other thing that I disagreed on is I had a professor tell me, you can't tell a person that there's hope, because what if there isn't? What if, XYZ is not possible? And I remember asking them, I was like, what if it is? What if it is possible that someone can reach a level of awareness and hope in their life that things do change? Because hope is the ability to believe that something else is out there. That's all hope is. And so I think part of what attracted me to the work was both miraculous and a beautiful encounter. The reason why I say miraculous is because I was working as a barista for years, and working at like a pottery barn for years, saving up 50% of my income, living with my parents to go to graduate school. And I get into graduate school and I get an email saying, hey, it's free. You only need to pay for your books. So both years, and the second year, by the way, I didn't apply to FAFSA. I wrote them a letter saying I forgot. At the end of the year, they wrote me a check saying your tuition is free. So I paid off that second year loan. So I felt like throughout my journey as a therapist, there were always open doors that I believe was God saying, hey, like walk through. This is for you. And the reason why I say it was like a spiritual thing is because I don't really think I had any hand in that. I think I was just given the opportunity to go to therapy for free. I was given the opportunity to go to graduate school for free. I had people willing to help me along the journey. And like it's just opened up a lot of different doors for me, but it's been a learning process. Like just because the first couple years of my therapy journey was free, I have invested so much money into like other forms of therapy and other trainings, and it's just woken me up to a completely different way of life. A lot of it was faith driven.
I'm really feeling the open heartedness of your, not only of I don't even know if devotion is the right word to your faith. I think it's just being with and really trusting that there
Yeah.
is, that the gift is there. And I hear your optimism and your gratitude. Like that just doesn't waver, like having an opportunity to go to school in the United States for free at the graduate level is a remarkable gift. And that you are taking that gift and using that to support others in a way that Yeah, it's really profound. So thank you for, taking that in and being with it and then traveling with it as part of your journey. Like that is, yeah. So it makes, and the word spiritual that you use, that hasn't wavered either. It seems like it's been a pretty founding, like a really grounding anchor for you to walk with you, alongside of you, through you. Um, so thank you for that. That's a real, it's a real wonderful treasure to have
Thank you, Gina.
internally. Yeah. No,
This is such a gift.
appreciate
Y'all are
it.
giving me so many words of affirmation. It's like, oh.
Well,
Maybe
you
that's your
deserve
love
every
language
bit
too.
of it. You deserve every bit of it.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, I'm just really struck by how you have taken all that you have experienced in your life and woven that into who you are and who you want to become. It's just really evident is that your faith certainly grounds you,
Mm.
and there's your ability to take in, because there are lots of parables, right? And there are lots of different um, ways of being, and how you have made that your own. Just that story about you befriending people who were alone and inviting people into the community such a young age. That's really impressive.
Mm-hmm.
At that age, we're usually thinking about ourselves and thinking about how we fit in, not how other people fit in. So that's really that tells me a lot about your deep soul space that you have been carrying around for a while.
I just got this thought. I was like, I remember texting Laura, my mentor, and I was like, hey, thank you so much for teaching me so much about talking to people. And she said something that just like struck me. She said, well, you just did it. Like you got a command and you did it. And she was like, there's something really beautiful about that because I think the foundation of all of it is the ability to listen and to take initiative. I think you can have all of the access to different forms of knowledge and profound awakening and still not do it
Right.
because you're not willing to listen. And I recently signed up for, um, like, this was one of my luxuries to myself. I signed up for an elite, like, gym membership. And it's a series of just like listening to someone and then going to the next thing. It's like circuit training, right? And I took the first class and the instructor said, "You're really good at listening. Like you hear what I want you guys to do, and most people don't do it. They just do their own thing. And so therefore they don't get the benefits of the workout." And I was like, "Oh, life is like that." Like we have the tools. We're willing to show up. But are we willing to take what we're instructed to do and to faithfully do what is being said? And so I'm a big fan of like, okay, what's underneath that? Like, what's underneath the principles of the rudimentary things of mastery? So, yeah.
So can I go a little deeper into
Yeah.
that? In terms of listening and the work that you do as psychotherapists, we all know, and what that skill set becomes more refined and more refined. But I'm also, what struck me is that we're all in Asian bodies, which
Mm,
is what really led us to this work about what does it feel like to be in our own bodies, having immigrated possibly to America in your case.
hmm
How has being an Asian woman um, been for you in America? Before
mm.
we even start with the work, just being little Helen and adult Helen and all the other versions of Helen, being in your Asian body.
Yeah. Well, I immigrated to this country with so much pride, being a
Mm,
Filipino, but I
mm,
also didn't know English. So I learned so much. I came to this country at 5, a month before turning 6. So I celebrated my 6th birthday. I remember my dad bought a cake from a grocery store. It was like a chocolate, German chocolate cake. And my sister was like right next to me, and she was like, I remember that moment because I was barely learning the English language and trying to grasp what it meant to see people with from different cultures and different upbringings, like all met in the same classroom. So I was in an English language class when I first immigrated here. And a lot of it was just like, wow, there are people that have white skin. Wow, there are people who have darker skin. Wow, there are people from Japan. My first teacher was from Japan. And I remember she was so great and gentle with me, trying to teach me what it looked like to be in a classroom. And I remember in the Philippines, every student was lined up vertically. So classrooms were a lot smaller, so you had 20 students kind of sardined into it, but students were allowed to come out of the class and say hi to their friends and then come back. And I remember there was one white person in my class because his parents were missionaries and he knew how to speak Tagalog fluently. And I remember asking him, I was like, why do you look different from everyone else? He's like, oh, it's because my parents are from, this country. I forget what country he was from, but like they're missionaries, so like they're teaching people about the gospel, but like I'm here by myself. And that was the only white person I had ever known before I immigrated
Wow.
to America. And I think a lot of it was just figuring out. And so I learned a lot of English from SpongeBob growing up. I learned how to talk to people, how to like interact with people from SpongeBob, and I would just practice with my parents. And I remember even being around them, I code switch. And so I
Mm.
learned that very quickly of like, oh, I can live in between two worlds. But sometimes I think to be an Asian woman with a completely different cultural context, my initial experience was as a child feeling really seen because I think there's a ton of privilege with being cute and small. People tend to give you attention. But as I was growing up, I realized that there was a lot of emphasis on positionality, that you had to be the loudest in the room to be heard, that people who were really great with words and were great communicators were prioritized more if you were taller, if you were skinnier. Like image
Mm.
in the United States matters so much more than it does in the Philippines. And I remember putting on a lot of different hats. And I think there was a lot of privilege growing up in Los Angeles because you never assumed anything. But once I immigrated to a different um, not immigrated, when I traveled to a different city, I would get treated differently. I would get stared at differently. I remember there was a time when I was 12 years old, I was like just like looking at comics, skimming through them. There was a white boy who came in, came out. The owner never gave him mind. I come in, I like look through the comics and I feel eyes staring down at me. And I look over and they're just like two people like looking at me suspiciously. And I always kind of had the sense that, oh, as like a brown girl, I'm looked at differently than other people. Going to stores specifically, everywhere
Mm.
else in the academic setting, in at church, I wasn't treated differently. Thankfully, so I was raised in like a multi-generational, multilingual, multi-ethnic church. So there was never any racism I experienced there. But when I went to Rite Aid, when I went to a
Mm.
convenience store, when I went to a gas station, I always felt like people were surveying me. Um, but it changes depending on how I dress. So I think to be an Asian woman in America, I think perception, I'm very aware of perception of like if I wear a t-shirt and jeans, I am perceived differently than someone who wears a nice blouse and nice slacks and nice shoes. Like people look at me with better privilege, right? So it's almost like how I appear and how I come off gives off a different um, look,
Mm.
right? So I think I'm very aware of that even systemically. And being in an interracial marriage, being married to a white guy, I feel like he doesn't have to do much to be heard. Um, And I feel like I've also internalized that in a way of like I over apologize in situations where I don't need to to get attention. Um, and then it's multifaceted, right? Because my parents are both medical professionals, so I knew how to navigate in a medical system. I think a lot of people of color don't know how to navigate it if they don't have family members who are within a medical system. So I never experienced any racism there because I knew how to advocate for myself. A lot of my medical providers were South Asian, Asian, Filipino. Thankfully, a lot of nurses are Filipino, so we know how to advocate in a medical system. But in like trying to talk about refunds in a store was really hard for me. Like if I didn't like a product, I felt really judged for asking a question about that. I felt like I was too much. Even in business, because I don't see a lot of Filipina women, Asian women being highlighted in the business world, I think I I judge myself, right? So I think part of my insecurity is like I don't see anyone like me in the entrepreneur space. Even in the private practice space, maybe there's yellow chair, maybe there's other psychotherapists, but we don't openly talk about our business proceedings. And so having to unlearn so many different belief systems there. Um, yeah, so that's what it's been like for me
Mm.
here.
That's incredibly insightful. Like, I think you just, as I'm listening, I certainly have experienced all of those pieces, and I love that you started off in your country. Those
Mm,
first 5, 6 years were pretty formative of you. Like you were saying, I never really, of being included, of belonging, and then noticing those different textures and layers of like feeling that you had privilege coming to America, and then feeling that your power was diminished at times, or
mm,
noticing when people were looking at you a little differently, and you feeling like, you know, uh, like you were talking about being in that grocery store, and the white boy just comes in and out, and then you
yeah.
obviously, that's important information, that because your nervous system felt a blip, like what happened there, and you were so young to
Mm,
notice that, and then taking that in as an adult in LA, and feeling as a psychotherapist being, and an entrepreneur being Asian, what is that like when there aren't enough models, um, and yet you can stand in your beauty,
oh, thank you.
yes, and do this work with great intention and power, not a power over, but your good power to do this work. And however that shows up is showing up today,
Mm.
in a real authentic way. So this is a real, you are a role model.
That's funny because
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I see myself that way as a role model, you know? Like I see myself as someone still trying to figure it out, but I
Mm-hmm.
also receive it. I receive it. Thank
Yeah, yeah, and we're always, this is our work, where we continue to do our work. I think it's lifelong.
you.
Would you
Mm.
agree, Nilifer?
Oh,
Yeah,
believe me, it's lifelong, and I would say maybe, beyond your life as well,
yes.
if you want to think about it that way.
Mm.
Ellen, I really resonated with your story. I mean, there's so many aspects of your story that I resonated with, but you said that you watched SpongeBob to learn the
Yes.
language, right?
Yeah.
So, well, I was reminded, in my own journey of coming into this in the U.S., and I came at a later age. I was 23 years old,
Mm.
and I already knew English, so that wasn't an issue. However, I didn't understand the accent of people, and I felt like people talked very fast in the U.S. And
Mm.
so I watched soaps, the
Soap operas.
soap operas, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
I watched soap operas to get used to or accustomed to the accent.
Yeah.
And I also want to just point out that what you just said, Gina, I think it was so important in terms of that foundation of where you've grown up or your
Mm.
early years. Because I had that experience, and I also want to pick up on the colonial piece at some point, but I
Mm-hmm.
just want to just continue to follow this thread. Is that when our frame of reference, perhaps when you've grown up in your own home country, is what it was like to be, in the majority or being part of that culture, and then you walk into a different culture, you are trying to adapt and adjust, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the frame of reference that I've noticed when I came in was because I remember talking to a friend of mine, and I said, "Oh, you just," and this is a white American friend, and I said, "Please, can you slow down because I don't understand your accent."
Mm.
And she was shocked that I told her that she had an accent because my frame of reference was that she had an accent. And she said,
Yes.
"I don't have an accent, you do." And I was
Mm.
shocked for her to tell me even that, right? What I'm trying to say is that you, when you come into, for us as Asian women, as Asians, coming into the US, I was face to face with the US centric sort of, that is a frame of reference,
Mm.
Mm.
right? And
That's
everybody
so
else is
true.
different. And of
Yeah.
course, we can move into the white supremacy aspect of it too, that everybody else is less than. Um, but what you were describing is that even in your 5-year old body and 6-year old body that you came in, you could look around with curiosity from your own cultural grounding. And I think this is the other piece that we often don't realize the level of um, toll it takes, perhaps the
Mm-hmm.
additional um, responsibility, not responsibility, but additional things that we have to do to adjust, is the ways
Mm.
that we're watching for cues of safety and danger,
Correct.
and how that becomes so part of our system that we don't even recognize that we're doing that, right? And you,
Mm-hmm.
in your story, what you're saying is that you were looking for how, what were the cues of safety and danger around you, and found ways to either adapt or to look for safety or feel that connection, because you felt that in your church.
Mm-hmm.
That was your, that was sort of your place of grounding and being
Mm-hmm.
seen and being heard, right? That being seen and being heard, I think that is something that, this is where I see that come through you, Helen, is how through your podcasts, Gina and I have had these conversations about, as Asian women, being seen is, it takes effort. I'm just curious if you've, how that's, that,
Mm-hmm.
how has that experience been for you as you do your podcast? Are you, as you're out there?
Mm. I think, I was just realizing this morning when I was reflecting. I was like, I always feel when I enter a room, am I allowed to be here? Do people want to hear from me? And it comes up in different areas of my life, but the one place I don't feel that is in my family of origin. And John, I'm probably going to bleep that out because I don't want people to know what his name is. But with my husband, when he sees me with my family, he says, "You never laugh louder. You never joke more than when you're around your family."
Hmm.
And there is like a sense of belonging and home that I feel with them that I don't feel with the outside world. And like there's a sense of bubbliness and fun. He says you're not afraid to take up space when you're around them. And I think that, you know, there is so much microaggressive racism of like, again, being in an interracial marriage. I do notice that people give my husband more attention than they do with me. And there's far less curiosity in that interaction. And so I have to develop my own sense of identity and my own friendships to feel like I am important, you know? And you, Nilifer, you talked a lot about like the colonialism piece. Like the Philippines has a lot of that as well, as do a lot of countries that have been taken over by colonialism. But in the Philippines, it's like if you look more white or white presenting, you are treated far better than someone who is more brown. And in America, it's almost like the opposite. The more tan you are, the more privilege you have. But if you are in a white body or in a Eurocentric body, right? Like it's so sad. And it's still there. It's almost like it's generational in a lot of ways, how that belief is subconsciously passed down over and over. And I'm learning to not hold resentment, but it's something that I'm still navigating, you know, as a young person living and being in a multicultural context where white supremacy is a thing and, you know, colonialism is a thing. So, yeah. Do y'all have any insights about that? I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Oh, it's getting richer and richer, and I think, you know, as we kind of go from general to more focused and sort of more guided, we start to see the little ones. You know, that's how I'm feeling as you were talking about, Nilifer. You were 23, so you had this much more larger time to kind of build a sense of identity of who you are, in where you lived, in your family of origin, with your family of origin, but also in the context of being around people who look like you. Right? That gives you a sense of like who you are and who they are, but have a sense of kind of cohesive unity, like, okay, I'm in this brown body, right? And then for you, Helen, you know, having had those 6 years of formative, kind of like feeling in your own family of origin to be yourself, to be fully who you are, in all the glee and all the joy and all the sparkle, you know, like it just that scintillate, you know, they're scintillating inside of who you are, and getting a sense of what that feels like with people that make you feel safe. And then you move, right, to a different cultural context. You move with a language where you're learning from an animated creature, SpongeBob, right?
That's so true.
but but behind that, it's like talking to ChatGPT.
All the places on SpongeBob.
But with ChatGPT is different, right? Because
Yeah.
you're
I'm
interacting.
teasing you.
Whereas with
Yeah.
SpongeBob, it's like
And I'm not,
yeah.
and I'm not making a joke. I'm just like saying that's, you know, the point of reference of where we learn is really from everything that comes towards us. And
Right.
it's how, and it's what we choose to move towards, or can we sit enough to sort of choose to decide what is going to affect us. But when we're little, we don't have that context. Everything's coming towards us and we're taking it all in and we're merging with it, and we think that's who we are. Whereas in this conversation, we're being able to sit in the ground of our wholeness and our sense and go, oh, this is what happened. This is how colonialism has affected our conditioning of who we identify as people. And so just listening to you as a 6-year-old, knowing how to navigate, and like what Nilifer was talking about with this neuroception of, you know, do I feel safe in this context? And if I don't, then I'm going to adjust. Then I'm going to adapt. Then I'm going to do whatever it makes me feel in that moment. So in your interrelation, you know, I'm also married to a white man. And what you just said, it was so interesting. Like he's over here and you're over here and you're having conversations. how do you show up? Do you move forward to join that conversation to be heard? Or
Mm.
can you just relax and listen to that conversation and recognize all the different, you know, things that are happening over there, and not lose your sense of who you are,
Mm.
that you belong to, you take up space. It might be a different space that may not resonate with the conversation, but I understand there is a pull, like, do you see me? Have do you know what I've gone through? You know, you can have that conversation in your head, but at the same time, I find that what I have learned has been able to allow him to be in his wholeness, and whatever life experiences that we have together have been shared, for sure. You know, we have children, and at the same time, I keep bringing back this work, is that really it is about you sharing your gifts, and those will be different from everyone that we meet, and they will be uniquely yours. You know, where whoever has passed them down to you, and whatever you take as part of your um, ongoing legacy to share with the world. So if if you're asking, like, how do you navigate that, it has been through conversations with beautiful people like you
Mm.
that has helped me find the heart of this work, not only in my own body, but to be unified with myself, and then also hear and be empathic and be um, compassionate with your stories, but not stealing them, not taking them, just recognizing the resonance of that we all are together in this. You know, we're all holding this together, and somewhere we all are, if we're ready and we're open, as you are, um, something lands for us in a new way that feels really soft. At least for me, and just even being with the three of you having this conversation has kind of woken up my heart, because sharing this is it can feel vulnerable. So that's just a little little gem
Mm.
dangling. If you want to take it, it's up to you.
Can I? So as Gina was talking about what delights you, right? I bet there's some like the joy and the delight. But sort of switching gears a little bit, like what do you enjoy playing with in terms of what brings you glee, and what makes you giggle, and what makes you laugh? What are some fun things that you enjoy?
Mm. I love laughter. I love comedy. So I think no one makes me laugh more than my sister does. Um, we're each other's like best friends. So she can be weird around me. I can be weird around her. She knows my whole context. I know hers. We've fought. We've resolved. We've been through so much together, and she shows up for me. And so just knowing that there was, that's the beauty of having a sibling, right? Like I have one person in my life who has walked with me throughout it all and knows me enough to joke with me about things, to be honest with me about things. And I love, I have like self-deprecating humor. So I love making fun of myself, and I love bold colors. That makes me giggle. It makes me laugh. I love playing with people's perceptions. I think that's the beauty of growing up as an immigrant, where I'm not tied to a certain look or to a certain perception.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care about those things. I don't care about how things come off, but I love experimenting. Like when I was in high school, my sister bought me fart putty, right? So I went to high school my freshman year. I would I would press down on the fart putty and just watch people's reactions to like the sound of a fart, right? It wasn't even a real fart, it was a sound of a fart. And I would experiment on like if I do it here, how do people perceive me? If I do it in class, how do people perceive me? And I would annoy my junior math school teacher. I'm so sorry for if you're listening to this, I'm so sorry for how I annoyed you in class. But I would just start laughing in the middle of class just to see how people reacted to that. And so I love play. Like I love like if I love cutting my hair as you can tell. But like it's interesting what even cutting my hair has done to my perception of people have called me chic. And no one's ever called me chic or like complimented my fashion sense more than I've ever gotten with longer hair. And that's interesting to me too, of
Mm-hmm.
like there's what I see myself as, there's who I authentically am, and then there's the image or the aura of how someone comes off when they just change something else, a little something like bodily dysfunction or like hair or something like that. I find so much joy in that of like, I don't care what people think about me, but like, let's just see how this one small change will change the way that I am being perceived, right? So it's just so fascinating to me how like those small little things. Like my mom just calls me like a schemer. She's like you're so funny, like you don't care. And I was like I really don't. You know? I don't. But it's like play to me, right? Like even these podcast episodes, I love them because I got to kind of see the evolution of the more you're on camera, the more you're yourself. So I've gotten to see the evolution of my um, roboticness in front of a camera. And like Shakespeare says, like all of life is a play, right? So like we're all playing something. I'm playing therapist. I'm playing this person. Um, so it just brings me so much joy, the comedy of it all. That like at the end of the day, we're all just people, but there are certain things that we put on or we do that give off this perception. And that's comedy. It's like, let me see what happens when I do this. Let me see what happens when I do this. Like, how do people react to that? You know?
Can I follow up on that a little bit? I
Yeah,
just
go
had
ahead.
this thought. I mean, this insight that just came to me as you were talking is
Yeah.
that you've taken code switching and flipped
Hmm.
it over its head,
Oh, interesting. Never
right?
saw it that way.
Because
Yeah.
there is we often talk about code switching as the toll it takes on our bodies, and
Hmm.
what you did instead was play with it.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's just beautiful. I
It
don't
is.
know. It just
It
sort of
is.
occurred to me as like, oh, and you just taught us a way that we can play with code
Yeah.
switching. I mean,
It's so
you're doing
funny.
it playfully, and in a curiosity way,
Yeah.
not a manipulative way, but a curiosity way. There's like, oh, what does this mean now? Right?
Can
Yeah,
I
can
tell
I
you a
have
funny
this?
story?
Oh, I
We've
think
had
And
all
it's,
these deep
yeah,
conversations about code switching, and I just
yeah,
love what you just
yeah.
said.
can I
I
tell you
do
a
too.
funny
All I
story?
want to do is hear your fart putty. Is that what it was?
Fart putty,
Yeah,
fart
I
putty. You
remember
can
that
get it
actually.
at a random
Yeah.
convenience store for like
Hmm.
$2 and just see what happens.
It's like the whoopee
But
cushion, right?
yes, it's like the
Like
whoopee
if you
cushion.
sat on it and it would make this noise and everyone would laugh. And
I will say like I mess with people all the time, like
oh, it's so
random
funny.
people, and it's so funny to me. I just find so much humor in it. I was going to my favorite bookstore, right? And there's always solicitors outside of a bookstore, a Trader Joe's, whatever.
Hmm.
And so this woman comes up to me, she looks me up and down, and already I'm like, okay, I'm gonna play with this, right? It was very quick and subconscious. She says, "Ma'am, do you enjoy nature?" And I go, "No." And she just looks at me like surprised. She goes, "You you don't like nature?" I was like, "No, I don't." And I just like walked by. I just like walked right past her. And she looks at me and she goes, okay, honesty, respect. And I just started giggling to myself. Like, I think those things are funny.
Yeah. That's so funny.
I think like I I have always been fascinated with like looking someone up and down and trying to
Mm.
perceive what they're like as an individual. Like all of that is not indicative of who someone really is, right? Like and I just find it so fascinating. Like it's why I love fashion. I love like, oh, like baggy jeans are in, like dangly bangly earrings are in. Like I wonder how that changes my perception. right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's just so fascinating to me because I've learned both from personal experience and just really knowing people through years of deep friendship that just because someone comes off a certain way doesn't mean that that's who they are, right? Like it's who they want to be perceived
Mm-hmm.
as. And I think having a sociology degree also helps with that too. So,
I'm just settling into this whimsical way of Helen. Replay and parts. Point. How has it been to speak about yourself? What's it
um,
like to
it
share?
it's good. Like
Yeah.
I'm not used to being on the other side, so
Mm-hmm.
I a couple of times I've had to use refrain to go, I want to ask this question, but I know that this conversation is supposed to be about me. Like
Mm-hmm.
for you, Gina, I wanted
Yeah.
to ask more about your meditation, and with you,
Mm-hmm.
Nilifer, I wanted to ask more about your personal experience with colonialism and with just like being in a Western context, Western central context. So, yeah, it there were so many times where I wanted to just insert myself and ask that question. But it was fun, like certain parts revealed about me in today's interview that
Mm-hmm.
maybe other people didn't know, so.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So maybe if rather than turning the tables back on Nilifer and I, just I'm curious, like, what are your meditation practices? So we
Ooh.
can. What does that
Um,
look like? What does that mean for you, even?
yeah, I go on a lot of walking meditations. So, during the middle of the day, I like to pause and I like to interrupt my day with a lot of reflection
Mm.
and personal accountability. I think that when I'm in a hurry or when I'm taking in a lot of stimulus, I like to just go on an hour-long walk and just look around at the neighborhood, look around at nature,
Mm.
wave hi to my neighbors, but a lot of it is sometimes one word intentions, like what does it mean to be slow? Like I'm getting this
Mm.
word today of slow, like this keeps coming up in my day. Another one is just like I call it conscious meditation of what does it look like to just be open to whatever God wants me to do next, and I look for signs or different synchronicities in the day that might point to that thing. An example of that is
Mm.
recently one of my parents had like a medical issue that just like threw me out of the saddle, if you will. Like I was in the middle of my work day. I had a really productive work day, and I get a call about someone being in the hospital, and I'm immediately just struck with the concept of time and how I can have an agenda about time, but there's other things going on, and what am I doing any of this for? And so I was
Mm.
praying through that, and I was like, God, give me a sign. Like, show me what I need to do. And throughout the day, I call it like happy little miracles. I'll get into conversations with people about time. And it won't even be things that I bring up. Like 5 minutes later, I run into another therapist in my office, and she talks about being decisive with her time as a mom of three and how she only takes a certain number of clients and how she's been really tactful about how she does time so that she can be around her family. Like that conversation just
Mm.
came up organically. And I'm like, interesting. And then I look at my phone and I find a podcast episode that's just like automatically downloaded about being intentional with your time. Right. So it's just different synchronicities that come up throughout the day. I definitely pray for and I ask for, and I just sit and wait and I'm still in those moments and I just let what happens happens. So those two things like slow
Mm.
walking meditations, sometimes I'll just like sit in prayer for not too long, like 5 minutes, and I'll just ask God what he wants me to say today, what he wants me to say, wants what he wants me to hear
Mm.
slash what he wants to say. So,
Yeah, thank you. I'm
Yeah.
receiving, as you're speaking, and I don't know if you know this about yourself, and I think it's just because of who you are, sort of the mantra of like slow and open and timeless
mm,
and stillness that kind of reverberates you as you lead in your podcast even, and I don't know if you recognize that. Yes, it's intentional, but I think it's also part of you. Yeah.
mm,
Of course, we have to kind of like remind ourselves to be slower, the tempo to be a little bit more like, yeah, like kind of like a jellyfish, right? You're kind of like moving in this world, and at the same time, you're interacting, with
yeah.
that slow openness kind of energy to accompany you. And just, I don't know if you recognize that about. That's how I think you've led every podcast I've been with you.
Oh, I
Yeah,
didn't know that about
yeah,
myself, that I came off that way.
yeah,
Thank you.
and playful.
Yeah.
And from
Very
a
much.
solid
Yeah.
sort of core, which is one of the things
Yes.
that
Mm,
you
Yes.
said over and over again in that podcast is, I don't care what other people think
Mm-hmm.
of
mm,
me, right? And so even in your play, in your curiosity, in your fun, in your learning, in all of that, it comes from that place of a sense of groundedness where I can be who I want to be without being pulled in a certain direction, or even if I am pulled in a certain direction, being curious about it or knowing about it. So that's I would say, we
Mm-hmm.
started this podcast was like, what is the core of you? What's the soul of you? What is, your deep wisdom? And I think that's what comes through, Helen, is how grounded you are within yourself in whatever ways that you have embodied that for yourself, whether it is through your faith, whether it is through your grandmother and your family, whether it is through your culture, whether it is through your growing up experiences and how you look for signs, right? Um,
mm,
there's a phrase, and a client introduced me to this phrase called God wink. And so we watch for God winks. What you're saying is,
Mm-hmm.
oh, we're looking the sign. I'm looking for a sign. There's actually a book called God Winks, and I can't remember the name of
Oh,
the
I'll
author,
write that down.
but there is a book called God Winks. So, uh, Deb Dana calls it glimmers,
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes.
right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
signs or whatever it is that we look for around us because the universe is speaking
Mm-hmm.
to us. And I think that's what I'm hearing in your voice is that there's a deep calling for you,
Mm,
and that there is
Mm-hmm.
also a sense of being open and curious from a place of groundedness that you
mm.
can look around and have fun with. What you just said about it's given me a whole different way of talking about
Code switching.
Code
code
switching.
switching.
And
And a
to
way
my
that we
knowledge,
want
in a
to
positive
embody
way.
that something we want to learn
Yeah.
because
Mm-hmm.
we think about it as something, a cue of danger that our nervous system picks up, right? So how do we move
Mm,
it to be curious and to
Mm-hmm.
play with it rather than to be swept away? So not to allow that toll, that allostatic load to play out in our
mhm.
bodies. And how do we, yeah, beautiful. I just love it. I
It's
just
just,
love what
Mm-hmm.
you're
I
offering.
think if you were, it's almost like, because I'm trained a little bit in ACT. Not a little bit, I think
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of ways, my therapy practice really circles on the ACT framework.
Mm,
But the cognitive reframing and the cognitive challenging that comes with comedy and
mhm.
humor and just seeing it from from that place, you know.
Yeah.
And then even as a child, like I was scrolling through different channels, and on Comedy Central, I landed on the movie Shallow Hal. Have you heard
Oh,
of that
yeah.
movie?
I watched
I
it.
I
Jack
haven't.
Black and Gwyneth Paltrow.
Yeah.
Essentially,
Mm-hmm.
it's a movie about a man who is extremely superficial, and he finds himself stuck in an elevator with Tony Robbins. And Tony Robbins basically plays this hypnotic character. And he says, Hal, you're extremely superficial. You judge people based on the color, not color, the perception of who you perceive them as in their beauty. I'm going to give you the gift of seeing people's hearts
Mm.
instead of seeing how people appear. And you will only see that from this point forward. And he gives him hypnosis. And like from that point on, he basically falls in love with a woman named Rosemary, who is played by Gwyneth Paltrow. And to everyone else, she is ugly, she is fat, she is this, she is that, right? Every label that you can give a person that is unpleasant. And he only sees her heart and who she is as a person. And that movie has profoundly changed the way that I see life in a weird way because it's a comedic movie, right? And so many people see it like as a funny film. I've heard people say that it's unrealistic, but it's how I perceive life of like it's funny to hear how people perceive others, but do you really see who they are underneath all of
Mm-hmm.
that,
Mm-hmm.
you know? It's very cringe now
Cringe.
as an adult to watch, but as a child, it made me think. I think the same person who made, the same brothers, I think, who made Dumb and Dumber
Mm-hmm.
made Shallow Hal. And Dumb and Dumber, it's it's a movie anyone can watch, but it really talks about the same thing, which is how are people perceiving you and what is your actual impact on the world? Like, you get two guys played by one of them being Jim Carrey, and Jim Carrey's a big fan of that too, like perception and how
Mm-hmm.
perception really plays a role into everything, you know?
It's so interesting. You live in LA,
Hmm.
in a
In the
world where
world of
there's
Hollywood and
play
acting
and
and yeah.
acting and,
Hmm.
and, and having that, and you're right in the field of it all. And at the same time, you don't need to spin into that vortex, right? Like,
Yeah.
you can still be like, and watch it because acting, as it's fun. It's
It's
another form
fun.
of play, right?
Yeah.
So, it's it's telling like where you are in the world and your place, and you're doing this work. Um, yeah, yeah. It's good work. Good work that you're doing, Helen.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So if we were bringing this to a close, what are some words that you would want to leave with, want to leave your listeners with? Like what are some two or three words that you would use?
I think the three words that come up for me now is know thyself by Socrates.
Mm.
I think it was Socrates. I
Mm-hmm.
could be wrong about that. I'll look it up after. But I think if you really know yourself, if you take the time to look within and try to figure out underneath all of the judgment that you may experience with yourself, the experiences, who are you really underneath all of that? And how can that bubble into your own self-expression, and
Mm-hmm.
just have fun. Like I'm a really big proponent of like really embracing who you are as an individual and just having make life art, use it as a form of creativity, not just for others, but more for you. Like what will make you giggle and laugh at the end of your
Mm-hmm.
life. And that's what it's about.
There's a deep innocence there, It's
Yeah.
very childlike. I
Yeah.
have to say, because when I first met Nilifer, and we would laugh and laugh, we would like spend hours and hours like talking, trying to get this work out in the world. And I had imagined that we were like two young little children, like little girlfriends, and we hadn't met in person. And then it was so sweet that we would be friends and talking about this stuff. But yeah, so I
I
just feel
do.
like you bring that.
I love that we are ending on this
Yeah,
note because I
yeah.
really do think that we need to laugh more and
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
to find, we started with the joy,
Yes, yeah,
that question, and I want to, I think we're ending in that place is that
yeah.
where is our place of fun and happiness and
Mm-hmm.
places of giggling and I also want to just acknowledge that you mentioned your sister.
Yes.
Yes, as being a big part of your um, there's some a level of solidarity with her where we can be honest and open and laugh and and also find support. So having that anchor in your life, it seems to have be a go-to for you that allows you to do some of those things, and I resonate with that.
Yeah, I was thinking of you, Nilifer, after I said that. I was like, your sister is a really big form of expression in your life too. I remember the discussion that we had our last podcast episode with your scarf,
Mm-hmm.
that you love wearing scarves.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. Yeah.
Right, I know, and I actually was looking for a scarf to wear, and I didn't find one in time before we got on our. But
Oh,
she's with me in
she's with
Yes.
you.
yes, yes. How are
Yeah.
we
This
doing?
Thank
was fun.
you. Thank you
Thank you
so
guys.
much.